this is CapCAN Notes, the official podcast of the Capital Area College Access Network. We're excited to engage the community in conversations about college access. I'm your host, Eric Cashman, and I'm AmeriCorps Vista serving with CapCAN. Joining me is Michelle Strauss, CapCAN's Executive Director, and our guest, Manon Steel, Michigan Program Associate with the Institute for College Access and Success, otherwise known as TICAS. So let's get started. First of all, Manon, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk to you both today.
So all three of us share something in common. We all graduated from James Madison College at Michigan State University, and we were all students of public policy. We begin all our podcasts with a personal story of who encouraged you to continue your education beyond high school. So why is that important to you, and who encouraged you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So originally, I was supposed to be a science major or a biological sciences major. I did 4 years of high school science and then an extra 2 years of IB biology, because I was really interested in, how people work and just trying to make people's lives better. But I found in my sophomore year of high school that I really had a passion for history and public policy. And that's thanks to my AP US history teacher, Mrs. Gray. Shout out to her. But she really encouraged my interest in history and my ability to do things like political and social analysis. And so thanks to her, I was able to leave the natural sciences and enter the social sciences and pursue things like studying education policy and how we can, use public institutions to help people more effectively.
Great. Well, it's fun to meet a fellow Madisonian. So
yes.
We want to learn a little bit more about what you do. So the Institute for College Access and Success, or TICAS, developed policy priorities for 2022 to advocate for with the governor and with our state legislature. So the first priority that we understand is investing in the tuition incentive program, or TIP scholarship, to eliminate the fee cap for recipients. Can you briefly explain what TIP is and why lifting the fee cap is necessary for low-income students?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Tuition Incentive Program, or TIP, is a financial aid scholarship or grant provided by the state, directed to students who come from low-income families or households. Typically, to qualify for TIP, you have to have been on Medicaid for 24 out of 36 months. You don't need to, fill out a scholarship to qualify for the program. You just need to fill out a FAFSA and have that sent to whatever school you're interested in attending, and they should directly apply the funds to whatever program you're studying. It is important to know, though, that to use phase 1 of the award, it's in 2 phases. You have to attend a community college. Phase 2 is for students at 4-year institutions. So a little bit of a hiccup there, but that is the basic idea of TIP. And then lifting the fee cap. So the way that, again, the award is structured, in the first 2 years for phase 1, you have your tuition and mandatory fees covered at a community college that you're attending. So mandatory fees don't cover all of the fees that students may have to pay depending on their course of study. For example, if you study STEM, like nursing, you may have to pay extra courses like excess course hours or lab fees. But just for the mandatory fees that all students must pay to attend a school, those can be really expensive. So making sure that all of those fees are covered to make college as affordable as possible, especially for our most low-income students who have the greatest need, is really, really important to making sure that every student has access to higher education and to pursue the degree that they want.
One of the things that we've talked about in meetings with legislators that I've had with you is that when students fill out the FAFSA, the clock automatically starts with their TIP scholarship. So
yeah,
it's important to make sure that people know that they have 10 years after they graduate to use those scholarships.
Yeah.
You wrote a policy brief entitled Primer and Equity Analysis, Centering Students in Michigan's Financial Aid Programs. One of the primary recommendations is to align the rules of qualifying and maintaining eligibility among Michigan's financial aid programs. What benefits are there to raising the amount of time you're eligible to use your TIP program benefits, and how does that support TCAS's goal?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So a little comment to what Michelle was saying. So you have 4 years after high school graduation in order to access your funds. So once you access your funds, then you have 10 years to be able to use those funds. But it's really important to make sure that all students are able to access the awards available to them, so that they're able to use those towards a degree. And not all students are able or are ready to go to college right out of high school. The state of Michigan has done a really great job of trying to expand access to financial aid in college for adult students. So in expanding the program benefits, including TIP, which again, benefits our lowest income families, it's ensuring that students, whenever they're ready to attend college, are able to access those funds and are able to afford college.
So the other important thing that TICAS advocates for is the alignment of reporting requirements across state departments who operate the different financial aid programs, and a targeted one-time investment for the state's Center for Educational Performance and Income, otherwise known as CEPI, to modernize the higher education data system. Why is it important for us to have accurate data and reporting, and what benefit do you expect this investment will have?
Yeah, again, a really great question. So it's important for a lot of reasons. First of all, for the state's knowledge to know, how many students are utilizing the program, how much money they need to provide for the program in the future, how many students are eligible. And it's really important also to know how many students who are using the program are, continuing to their next year of study, or persisting or graduating from the program of study and ending up with a diploma or certificate. That's really important just for the state to know in terms of, what their investments are. As policy analysts interested in higher education, having this information allows us to better analyze the programs among what we would consider metrics of success. So are the funds we're using helping students to access college? If yes, that's great. What can we do to make it more accessible? And let people know more about it. If students are accessing college but not continuing, how can we use this program to ensure that students are continuing on to the next year? And in that same vein, if we have low graduation rates among students using the program, how can we leverage these funds and make more targeted investments in this program to make sure that those students are graduating? Similarly, it's really important for individuals who are counselors, particularly in financial aid programs or at institutions, so that they're better able to, help students who may be struggling and are qualifying for a financial aid program, and to, make sure that those students aren't at risk of losing their grants. And then at high schools, if you qualify for programs like TIP, which, grant you free community college for the first 2 years, then it would be really important to let students know, because they may otherwise think that they're not able to afford college and may delay their plans otherwise. So making sure that we have the most accurate information possible and the most information possible is really going to help everyone who's invested in making sure that every student in the state of Michigan can access a college degree or post-secondary credential if they want one, have access to those funds and can be successful to completing that degree. And that's better overall for the students, the people, and the state of Michigan as a whole, because students who graduate with a degree, have higher incomes, they have less reliance on social services, and they bring more money back to their communities, and can stimulate greater economic growth, which will provide a more sustainable future for both their families, their communities, and the state as a whole.
And I will just note for our listeners that we use that CEPI data that we get through My School Data to develop our data dashboard that we present to the community and to each one of our school districts every year to help us determine whether or not we're making progress in our college access and readiness benchmarks that we've set here in the community.
Absolutely. It's so important to know if we're working towards our goals. And it's hard to do that without the proper information.
Definitely. Thanks.
So speaking of data and reporting, the pandemic has hit Michigan students hard, Michigan's education in general hard. with a reported 8% drop in enrollment from 2019 to 2021. And much more dramatic drop specifically amongst minority and disadvantaged populations. So what else is TICAS advocating for in order to help mitigate some of these losses, especially amongst these more heavily impacted communities?
Yeah, so we know that the pandemic has been particularly hard amongst Michigan's lowest income families. You know, a lot, and all families have struggled during the pandemic. We know that a lot of people lost their jobs, that they had to postpone their college plans for a variety of reasons. So to encourage students, particularly traditional age students, to enroll in higher education, we are proposing a scholarship to help them pay for college. We are supportive of a COVID class grant, which has been proposed. It would provide $2,500 for students at two-year institutions and $5,000 for students at four-year institutions. Students would just need to complete a FAFSA and continue to attend school full time for the duration of the award in order to remain eligible for the award. And this program would benefit the high school graduating classes of 2020, 2021, and 2022. So what we're calling the COVID classes, since they have been most disproportionately hit in their high school experiences, most disproportionately hurt by the pandemic.
Mm-hmm. So we all know that the media loves to cover the issue of student loan debt, and that it is really gotten to a point where people of all economic levels are having difficulty affording college. So you have a project, part of TICAS, called the Project on Student Debt. Now, how has the pandemic reinforced or changed the need for this project as we move forward?
That is an amazing question. So because, I mean, part of the issue is that COVID has created so much disruption to higher education. As I stated earlier, a lot of students are no longer going to college or are postponing their plans in terms of dropping out. So it's created a lot of disruption in terms of what would normally be taken on by students, so the amount of debt that they would traditionally hold. And because of the disruption in the workforce, it's created a lot of disruption in terms of whether or not they're able to get jobs that allow them to pay that debt back. Furthermore, you know, there's also the delay in repayment on student loans. And TICAS has done a lot of work to provide some guidelines on what we can best do to help students re-enter repayment once they have to, I believe in May. So it's also really important to note that we still don't know a lot of the information about how COVID has affected student debt and students taking on debt, just because there's not a lot of information on it yet. We're going to be continuing to study this far into the future and have conversations about how we can best support students in repaying what debt they owe, and providing better information to students so that they can take out debt, being fully aware of what the process is.
So a lot of people probably don't know that TICAS actually advocates for these policy changes on the federal level and then in many states, including Michigan. But one of the things that I've enjoyed doing with you is actually being engaged in advocacy with our policymakers on the state level. So can you talk about specific tactics that individuals, especially our listeners and potentially students, can do to advocate for these policy priorities? And of course, where can they get more information about TICAS and your policy priorities?
Yeah, that's amazing. So if students and families are really interested in expanding access to financial aid, I would highly encourage them to learn more about the state financial aid programs, possibly to read our report at ticas.org. And if they're interested, to contact either their local college access network to continue to learn more, or to reach out to their legislators and express their interest in making sure that all students are able to have full access to financial aid. That's really important. They're also more than welcome to follow both their local and the Michigan College Access Networks, or to follow TICAS at TICAS_org on Twitter or Instagram to continue to learn more.
And just to note for our listeners, we're going to add the advocacy workshop that I did to our newsletter, so that if people are interested in learning some specific tactics of how to communicate with legislators, you can learn more about that. So thank you.
So it seems like we're coming to the end of the interview. And I have one last question. We end every interview with hashtag CapCAN notes, where you would say your name and what you know. So I ask you, Manon Steel, who are you and what do you know?
My name is Manon Steel, and I know that expanding access to financial aid will help more students enroll in higher education and complete their degree, which will in turn provide a stronger, more sustainable future for them, their families, and their communities, including the state of Michigan.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. So I want to thank you, Manon, for coming on the podcast and chatting with us.
Thank you. It's been a wonderful conversation.
Thanks, Manon.
Thank you. For more information on CapCAN, please be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. Links will be in the video description below, or visit our website at capcan.org. Thank you all for listening to us today, and we will see you again soon.